I sat across from my son Doug at Riverside Bistro, his favorite restaurant in town. The evening had started pleasantly enough with casual conversation about the unseasonably warm April weather. Doug and his wife Amanda ordered appetizers while I sipped my water, enjoying the chance to see them without their usual rush. The candlelight caught the silver in my son's hair, reminding me how quickly time passes. As our entrees arrived, Doug cleared his throat and casually announced, "Mom, we have good news. We're moving in next month." The words hung in the air as my fork froze midway to my mouth. I felt my heart race as I processed his bombshell announcement. I had sold my beloved family home 3 weeks ago. The closing was in 2 days. I took a deliberate sip of water, met his expectant eyes, and calmly replied, "That's awkward. I already sold the house. It's not mine anymore." The drive home from dinner was a blur. Rain had started falling, matching my mood as I navigated the familiar streets toward the Victorian house I had called home for 40 years. Frank and I had purchased it when Doug was just a baby, stretching our budget to the breaking point because we fell in love with the wraparound porch and original hardwood floors. We raised both our children there, marking their heights on the kitchen doorframe and hosting countless holiday gatherings in the formal dining room. When Frank died of a heart attack 2 years ago, everything changed. The house that once felt like a haven became an overwhelming responsibility. The property taxes increased yearly, and maintenance costs drained the modest nest egg we had built. Each room held memories that sometimes comforted me, but often left me in tears, reaching across an empty bed for a husband who was never coming back. After 18 months of grief counseling and financial planning, I made the difficult decision to sell. My financial advisor explained that downsizing was necessary for my long-term security. The housing market had recovered nicely, and my neighborhood had become increasingly desirable for young families. The Grants, a couple in their early 30s expecting their first baby, fell in love with the house just as Frank and I had decades earlier. Jessica Grant had tears in her eyes as she touched the height markings in the kitchen, telling me she could already imagine recording her own child's growth there. I accepted their offer, even though it was slightly below my asking price, something about them reminding me of Frank and myself all those years ago. I found a lovely 2-bedroom condo in a community for active seniors, with no yard work and lower utility bills. The weight that lifted from my shoulders was immediate. For the first time since becoming a widow, I felt excited about my future. The closing was scheduled for Thursday, just 2 days away. My belongings were mostly packed, with the moving company confirmed for Friday morning. I had given away furniture to both my children, keeping only what would fit in my new place. Everything was carefully planned for my fresh start. But now, pulling into my driveway for one of the final times, I replayed the disastrous dinner conversation in my mind. "What do you mean you sold the house?" Doug had demanded, his voice rising enough that diners at nearby tables glanced our way. "Exactly what I said," I explained calmly. "The closing is Thursday. I bought a condo at Lakeside Gardens. I told you I was considering this months ago. You mentioned maybe selling someday, not that you'd actually done it." Doug's face had flushed red, a warning sign I recognized from his childhood tantrums. "We've been planning this move for months. We gave notice at our apartment last week." Amanda dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. "We have to be out by the 15th. Where are we supposed to go?" I was stunned. Why would you assume you could move into my house without discussing it first? You never once asked if that would work for me. The conversation deteriorated from there. Doug revealed they were in serious financial trouble. His voice grew louder as he accused me of betraying the family by selling what he called their inheritance out from under them. "You know what Dad would say about this?" "He'd be ashamed," Doug had said, landing the blow he knew would hurt most. I had left enough cash on the table to cover the bill and walked out, ignoring his calls as I drove away. Now, sitting in my car watching raindrops chase each other down the windshield, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. Doug's parting words echoed in my head. "You need to fix this, Mom. Family comes first." Was I being selfish? Had grief clouded my judgment so much that I had failed to consider my children's needs? I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted by the weight of it all. Tomorrow I would call my real estate agent and see what options I had, if any. Maybe the Grants would understand if I explained the situation. But the thought of disappointing that young couple made my stomach turn. I had no idea the worst was yet to come. 3 days after the disastrous dinner, I was sorting through old photo albums when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Doug standing on my porch, shoulders slumped, holding a paper bag from my favorite bakery. My first instinct was relief that he had come to apologize, followed immediately by wariness. Doug rarely admitted fault without wanting something in return. I opened the door, and he greeted me with a tight smile. "Peace offering?" He held up the bag, which I could smell contained cinnamon rolls. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Coffee?" We settled at my kitchen table, the same one where I had helped him with homework, and later watched him feed his own daughter, Lily. The familiarity of it felt both comforting and strange, knowing most of my furniture would soon be relocated. "Mom, I'm sorry about the other night," Doug began, breaking a cinnamon roll in half and pushing the larger portion toward me. "I was shocked, and I didn't handle it well." "I appreciate that," I said, though I noticed his apology didn't include acknowledging that his assumption had been unreasonable. "So the closing is today?" he asked, his tone deliberately casual. I nodded. "At 2 this afternoon. What did you get for the place?" When I hesitated, he added, "Just curious what the old neighborhood is going for these days." I told him the figure, and his eyebrows shot up. "That's it? Mom, this place is worth at least $50,000 more than that." "Did you even have a realtor?" "Of course I did. Sarah Williams, Frank's cousin's daughter. She's been in the business 20 years. I felt defensive. "The Grants are a lovely young couple. They reminded me of your father and me when we bought this place." I was happy to give them a bit of a break. Doug's face darkened at the mention of the buyers. "These people you barely know get a $50,000 gift, while your own son is struggling. That makes a lot of sense." I set my coffee cup down harder than intended. "Doug, I had no idea you were having financial problems. You've never said a word about it." His expression shifted to something softer, more vulnerable. I was embarrassed. "I didn't want to worry you after everything with Dad." He took a deep breath. "The truth is, things are bad. I lost my job at Weston 6 months ago." 6 months? I was stunned. Doug had been an executive at Weston Financial for nearly a decade. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought I'd find something quickly. My resume's strong, and I've got good references. But the market's terrible right now, especially for someone at my level." He ran a hand through his hair. "We've been living on savings and credit cards. That's why we need to move in here. We can't afford the rent anymore." My mind raced. Why hadn't he mentioned this during our weekly calls? What about the vacation to Florida they'd taken just 2 months earlier? Before I could ask, my phone rang. It was Amanda. Doug answered it for me, putting it on speaker. "Hey, it's me. I'm with Mom now." "Oh, thank goodness." Amanda's voice sounded strained. "Marion, please tell me there's a way to stop this house sale. We just got a final notice on our apartment. They're starting eviction proceedings if we don't pay by next week." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Eviction?" "I didn't want to tell you how serious it was," Doug said, looking pained. "Put Lily on," Amanda said. She wants to talk to Grandma. A moment later, my 7-year-old granddaughter's voice came through the speaker. Grandma, are we going to live in your house? Mommy said we might have to live in our car if we can't. I don't want to live in our car. Her voice quavered. My heart clenched. Oh, sweetheart, no one's going to live in a car. I promise. After the call ended, Doug leaned forward. Mom, I know this is last minute, but isn't there any way to stop the sale? Tell them you changed your mind. Pay a penalty if you have to. We'll pay you back eventually. I don't know if that's even possible, I said, feeling cornered. The closing is in a few hours. At least call your agent and ask. Please, Mom. You're our only hope right now. After Doug left, I immediately called my best friend Patricia, who had been my rock through Frank's illness and death. She listened as I poured out the whole story. Marion, something doesn't add up, she said when I finished. Executive positions come with severance packages. And didn't they just take Lily to Disney World? That's not cheap. Her questions mirrored my own doubts. I pulled out the sales contract and called my lawyer, who confirmed what I suspected. Backing out now would mean losing my earnest money, paying the grant's inspection and appraisal costs, possibly covering their temporary housing, and likely facing a lawsuit for specific performance. The financial hit would be devastating, not to mention the ethical breach of pulling the rug out from under a young family who had acted in good faith. I called Sarah Williams next, who was appalled at the suggestion. Marion, we can't do that to the Grants. They've sold their condo, given notice at their jobs for the move. Everything's in motion, and frankly, your son should have talked to you before making plans for your house. She was right, of course. But as I hung up, I felt torn between my obligation to the buyers and my duty to my son. What kind of mother lets her family face eviction when she has the means to help? Yet something about Doug's story nagged at me. I needed more information before making any decisions. The closing proceeded as scheduled. As I signed the final papers transferring ownership of my home of 40 years, I felt both grief and relief. The Grants shook my hand warmly, promising to take good care of the place. I wished them happiness there, and meant it, despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach about what awaited me when Doug learned I had gone through with the sale. That evening, I called Doug and told him the house now legally belonged to the Grants. His response was cold fury. "Thanks for nothing," he said before hanging up. I sat in my half-packed living room, surrounded by boxes labeled with the rooms of my new condo, feeling like I'd failed as a mother. But another part of me whispered that something wasn't right with Doug's story, and I needed to understand what was really happening before I could help him properly. 2 days after the closing, I decided to surprise Doug and Amanda with lunch. I told myself it was a peace offering, but truthfully, I needed to see their living situation for myself. I picked up sandwiches from their favorite deli and drove to their apartment complex across town. Their building was in one of the newer developments, with manicured grounds and a staffed entrance gate. I had been here for dinner parties and birthdays, but hadn't visited in several months. I gave my name to the guard, who waved me through without checking any list, suggesting they weren't facing imminent eviction as claimed. I parked and gathered the food, rehearsing what I would say. As I approached their door, I heard laughter inside. I knocked, and the laughter abruptly stopped. Amanda opened the door, surprise evident on her face. "Marion, we weren't expecting you." "I brought lunch," I said, lifting the bag. "I thought we could talk things through better on a full stomach." She hesitated before stepping back. "Come in. Sorry about the mess." The mess was minimal, a few of Lily's toys on the floor, mail on the counter. What caught my attention was what didn't match their story of financial desperation. A new 70-inch television hung on the wall, still with the corner sticker that showed it was this year's model. Designer shopping bags sat by the couch. Amanda's purse on the counter was a brand I recognized from a magazine, the kind that costs more than a month of my Social Security. "Grandma!" Lily came running from her bedroom and threw her arms around my waist. She was wearing brand new sneakers, the light-up kind that Doug had complained about being overpriced just last Christmas. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, hugging her. "I brought your favorite turkey sandwich." "With avocado?" "Yum!" She bounced excitedly. "Can I eat it while I finish packing for Disney?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "Disney?" Amanda shot Lily a warning look. "Just a weekend trip next month. Nothing extravagant." "But you said we're staying 5 days, Mommy," Lily corrected innocently. "And Daddy said we get to stay in the castle this time." Amanda's cheeks flushed. "Lily, why don't you take your lunch to your room and finish sorting which toys you want to bring?" After Lily left, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. I noticed other details now: the new leather sectional that hadn't been here at Christmas, the expensive coffee maker on the counter, Amanda's diamond earrings that were definitely larger than the ones Doug had given her for their 10th anniversary. Doug emerged from the back hallway, his surprise at seeing me quickly masked. "Mom, what brings you by?" "I brought lunch," I repeated, my voice steady despite my churning emotions. "Thought we should talk about your situation and how I might be able to help." We ate with strained conversation, mostly about Lily's school projects and the weather. I asked casual questions about their lease and job prospects, receiving vague answers that contradicted their earlier urgency. When I mentioned the upcoming Disney trip, Doug dismissed it as just a little something we'd planned before things got tight and changed the subject. After an hour, I made an excuse about meeting Patricia for coffee and left, my mind whirling with questions and doubts. Instead of going home, I drove to Frank's sister Grace's house. Grace had always been direct to the point of bluntness, a quality Frank had admired in his older sister. If anyone would give me unvarnished truth, it would be Grace. She welcomed me with a hug and iced tea on her patio. When I explained my visit and described Doug's claims, her expression shifted from surprise to something like resignation. "Oh, Marion," she sighed. "I was afraid something like this might happen." "What do you mean?" She set her glass down carefully. "I didn't want to worry you after Frank passed, but Doug's been financially irresponsible for years. He borrowed $20,000 from Walter and me 3 years ago for what he called a sure-thing investment. Never saw a penny back." I was stunned. He never mentioned any loan. I'm not surprised. He also borrowed from Frank's brother Ted last year, said it was for Lily's medical bills, but Ted saw them in Aspen a month later, staying at that fancy resort. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Why wouldn't anyone tell me this? Frank always protected Doug after he died. She shrugged. "We didn't want to add to your grief." Grace shared more. How Doug and Amanda had stayed with her sister-in-law rent-free for 8 months, while claiming to be between houses. How family heirlooms I had given them, as keepsakes, had appeared for sale online. How they consistently lived beyond their means, while extracting financial support from various relatives. The job loss might be real, Grace conceded, but their financial problems are chronic, not acute, and certainly not your responsibility to fix by handing over your house. I left Grace's feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. On the drive home, I called my daughter Judy, who lived in Colorado with her family. I rarely involved her in issues with her brother, knowing their relationship had been strained since childhood. "Mom, I love Doug, but he's been a financial disaster since college," Judy confirmed after hearing my story. "Remember when Dad paid off his credit cards before his wedding?" $20,000 that was supposed to be from your retirement fund? Doug swore he'd pay it back in monthly installments. He did pay it back, I said automatically. No, Mom. Dad forgave the debt after 6 months because Doug kept missing payments. He made Dad promise not to tell you because you'd be disappointed in him. More calls to family members revealed a pattern stretching back decades. With each conversation, I felt increasingly foolish. How had I missed this? Had I been so determined to see Doug as the successful son that I'd willfully ignored evidence to the contrary? The next morning, I met with Patricia at her house, bringing copies of text messages and notes from my conversations. She helped me organize the information chronologically, creating a clear picture of Doug's pattern of financial manipulation. What troubles me most, Patricia said, is how they're using Lily in this, making her think she might have to live in a car. That's emotional abuse, Marion. She was right. Using a child as an emotional pawn crossed a line I couldn't ignore. So, what do I do now? I asked. I can't just abandon my son despite all this, but I also can't enable behavior that's hurting his family. Patricia squeezed my hand. You need to establish boundaries while still offering appropriate help. You're moving to your new place tomorrow, right? Get settled. Then invite them over for a calm, direct conversation. Bring receipts, so to speak. Don't let them gaslight you about what's really happening. That night, I searched through old financial records Frank had kept meticulously. I found notations of loans to Doug that matched the timeline family members had described. The evidence was undeniable. I had been an unwitting enabler through my silence, and willingness to believe the best of my son despite mounting evidence to the contrary. As I packed the last of my belongings, I felt a strange mix of sadness and determination. The house that had witnessed 40 years of my life would belong to someone else tomorrow. But perhaps this clean break was exactly what I needed, not just from the physical property, but from patterns of enabling that had done none of us any good. I resolved to have an honest conversation with Doug and Amanda. I would offer real help, not a free house, but perhaps assistance with apartment deposits, financial counseling, job search support. It wouldn't be what they wanted, but it would be what they needed. And what I needed was to stop compromising my own security and self-respect in the name of misguided maternal sacrifice. As I taped up the final box, my phone buzzed with a text from Doug. We need to talk about options. Coming over tomorrow at 2. I texted back simply, I'll be at the new condo. Moving day tomorrow. We'll send address. His response was immediate. Don't bother. We'll find you. The threatening undertone wasn't subtle. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, ready or not. I went to bed in my empty house for the last time, uncertain what the next day would bring, but increasingly confident in my right to prioritize my own well-being alongside my family's needs. The moving company arrived promptly at 8 the next morning. I watched as they efficiently loaded my life's possessions into their truck, leaving behind only the furniture and household items I'd agreed to include with the house sale. By noon, I was standing in my new condo, surrounded by boxes and the few pieces of furniture the movers had already assembled. My new home was modest, but perfect for my needs. 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for guests, in a secure building with amenities designed for active seniors. The kitchen was smaller than I was used to, but updated with new appliances. Floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room overlooked a community garden. Most importantly, it was affordable, with monthly costs well within my fixed income. Patricia had helped me unpack the essentials, and left just before 1, promising to check in later. I was arranging books on a shelf when my phone rang Doug. We're on our way. Lily's with us. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Doug? Wait, I began. but he had already hung up. I hadn't expected them to bring Lily. It was a school day, and this conversation wasn't appropriate for a 7-year-old to witness. I quickly prepared a space in the second bedroom with some toys and books I'd brought for her visits, then mentally rehearsed what I needed to say. They arrived 40 minutes later. Doug barely glanced around before launching into complaints about parking and the building's security system. Amanda looked uncomfortable, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. Lily ran straight to me for a hug. "Is this my new room, Grandma?" she asked, peering into the guest bedroom. "It's where you'll stay when you visit," I corrected gently, noting how quickly she'd been primed to think she would live here. "Lily, why don't you check out the books Grandma has in there while we talk grown-up stuff?" Amanda suggested. Once Lily was settled, I offered coffee, which they declined. We sat in my small living room, the atmosphere tense. "So this is what you traded our family home for," Doug said, his tone dismissive. "Pretty cramped." "It's perfect for one person," I replied evenly, "which is what I am now." About that, Doug leaned forward. "We've been discussing options. Since the house is sold, we think the most logical solution is for us to move in here with you temporarily. 6 months, maybe a year at most." I blinked, genuinely shocked. "This is a 2-bedroom condo. There's no space for 3 additional people." Amanda jumped in. "We thought Lily could share your room. Doug and I can take the guest room. We know it's not ideal, but family sacrifices for each other, right?" The presumption took my breath away. Before I could respond, Doug continued. "Alternatively, you could help us with a down payment on a house. The market's tight, but with $60,000 from you, we could qualify for something decent." $60,000? I repeated, struggling to maintain my composure. "Well, yeah. You just made a profit on the house sale, and we're in a crisis here," Doug said, as if requesting lunch money. "Family helps family." I took a deep breath. "Before we discuss any of that, I think we need to address the real situation. I've been doing some research about your financial circumstances." I laid out what I had learned, the pattern of loans from family members, the consistent living beyond their means, the manipulation of relatives through dramatic claims of poverty while maintaining a luxury lifestyle. Their reactions shifted from surprise to denial to anger as I continued. Doug interrupted repeatedly, his voice rising, until I raised my hand. "Please let me finish. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because we can't solve a problem until we acknowledge what it really is." "This is ridiculous," Doug snapped. "You've been talking to people who don't know our situation. Yes, we've borrowed money when things were tight. Everyone does that. But painting us as some kind of con artists is just offensive. Then explain the Disney vacation you're planning when you claimed you might be homeless," I said quietly. "Explain the new television and furniture I saw yesterday when you told me you were facing eviction." Amanda flushed. "Those things were purchased before Doug lost his job. We can't return them now." "Actually," I said, "I checked the purchase date on the TV. It was bought 2 months ago, 4 months after Doug says he lost his job." I turned to my son. "And your building management confirmed you're not in any eviction proceedings. Your rent is paid through next month." Doug's face darkened with anger. "You checked up on us? What kind of mother spies on her own son? The kind who's being manipulated," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Doug, I want to help you, but real help means addressing the actual problem, not enabling behaviors that keep you in this cycle." "Unbelievable," he muttered. "We come to you in need, and you turn it into some kind of intervention. What's next? Drug testing?" I tried a gentler approach. I understand pride makes it hard to admit financial mistakes, but pretending everything's fine while debt piles up isn't working. I've put together some information on financial counseling services. I'd be willing to help with— Doug cut me off with a harsh laugh. Financial counseling? We don't need lectures on budgeting. We need actual help. But clearly, that's not something you're willing to provide. He stood abruptly. This was a waste of time. Let's go, Amanda. Amanda hesitated, looking torn. What about the grants? She asked Doug in a low voice. A chill ran through me. What about the grants? Doug shot Amanda a warning look, but she continued. They seemed really understanding on the phone. Maybe we should tell her. Tell me what? I demanded, standing now too. Doug's expression shifted to something calculating. Fine. I reached out to the buyers of your house. You did what? I felt lightheaded with shock. I explained that my elderly mother was showing signs of dementia and hadn't been competent to make the sale. That Frank would have wanted the house to stay in the family. That with some legal pressure, we could probably get the sale invalidated. I sank back into my chair. You told them I have dementia? That's not just a lie, Doug. It's elder abuse. It's called advocating for our family, he retorted, and they seemed pretty concerned, called your real estate agent right away. Sarah Williams had indeed called me yesterday, concerned about a strange conversation with the buyers, but I hadn't connected it to Doug. The pieces suddenly fit together. You're trying to sabotage the sale, I said, the reality dawning on me, even though it's already closed, even though it would financially devastate me. We're trying to keep our family afloat, Amanda interjected. Sometimes that means fighting for what should be ours. The house was never yours, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. It was mine and Frank's. We worked 30 years to pay it off. We maintained it. We had every right to sell it. Dad would have wanted, Doug began. Don't you dare tell me what Frank would have wanted, I interrupted, anger finally breaking through. Your father valued honesty and responsibility above all else. He would be heartbroken to see you manipulating family members and teaching Lily that lying is how you solve problems. Doug's face contorted with rage. You have no idea what Dad really thought. He protected you from the truth about a lot of things, including what a disappointment you were to him sometimes. The cruel words landed like a physical blow. I took a shuddering breath, fighting tears. I want you to leave now, I said quietly. Gladly, Doug snapped, but this isn't over. You chose strangers over your own family. There are consequences for that kind of betrayal. Are you threatening me? I asked, disbelief coloring my voice. I'm stating facts. If you're mentally incompetent enough to sell the family home out from under us, maybe you're not competent to manage your own finances either. There are legal remedies for that. The threat was unmistakable, he was suggesting, seeking guardianship or power of attorney over my affairs. I felt a surge of fear followed by resolve. Lily, I called, my voice carefully controlled. Time to say goodbye, sweetheart. My granddaughter came out of the bedroom, clutching a book. Can't we stay longer, Grandma? Not today, honey, I said, kneeling to hug her. But we'll plan something special soon. Don't count on it, Doug said coldly. Until you come to your senses, we need to reconsider what kind of influence you're having on Lily. They left without another word, Doug practically dragging Lily, who looked back at me in confusion. As the door closed behind them, my knees gave way, and I sank to the floor, trembling with shock and grief. My son had not only tried to manipulate me into giving him my house, but had actively attempted to sabotage a legal sale. Now he was threatening to take legal action against me and cut off access to my granddaughter. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that for several moments I couldn't breathe through the pain of it. When I finally managed to stand, I called Patricia. Her immediate response was to come over, and within 20 minutes, she was at my door, arms full of groceries and a bottle of wine. As we unpacked boxes and organized my new kitchen, I recounted the confrontation through intermittent tears. Patricia listened without interrupting until I finished. "Marion," she said finally, setting down the plate she'd been unwrapping, "this isn't just manipulative behavior anymore. What Doug's doing is criminal. Making false claims about your mental competency, interfering with a legal contract, threatening to take control of your finances. These are serious matters. You need legal protection." I nodded slowly, the full implications sinking in. I never thought I'd need protection from my own son. Patricia squeezed my hand. "The Doug you raised is still in there somewhere. But right now, his financial desperation and entitlement are driving him to do terrible things. The kindest thing for him, for Lily, for yourself, is to establish firm boundaries with real consequences." That night, alone in my new bedroom, I cried for what felt like hours. Not just for the immediate situation, but for the years of enabling that had contributed to it. For Frank's well-intentioned but ultimately harmful protection of our son from the consequences of his actions. For my own willful blindness to patterns that must have been visible had I been willing to see them. By morning, my grief had hardened into determination. I would not allow Doug's threats to stand, nor would I abandon my granddaughter. This situation required strength I wasn't sure I possessed, but for Lily's sake, for my own sake, and even for Doug's long-term well-being, I would find it. I reached for my phone and called my lawyer. The days following Doug's threats passed in a haze of anxiety and activity. My lawyer, Stephen Harmon, took immediate action, sending a cease and desist letter regarding the false statements about my mental competency and interference with the house sale. He also contacted the Grants directly to reassure them of the sale's legitimacy and my sound mental state, including medical documentation from my recent physical. Meanwhile, I struggled to settle into my new home, each unpacked box and arranged furniture piece a reminder of what should have been an exciting fresh start, now tainted by family conflict. Sleep eluded me. I lost 5 pounds in a week. When Patricia found me staring blankly at an unopened box of kitchen items, having forgotten what I was doing, she insisted I see my doctor. "This is affecting your health, Marion," she said firmly. "You need support." Dr. Lewis prescribed mild anti-anxiety medication and recommended I join a support group for family estrangement, something I never imagined would apply to my life. The first meeting I attended was both heartbreaking and strangely comforting. Hearing others share similar stories of manipulation and betrayal by loved ones made me feel less alone, less like a failure as a mother. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I still hadn't heard directly from Doug, though his campaign against me had expanded. My phone filled with concerned messages from extended family and old friends, all variations on the same theme. "Doug says, you're not doing well. We heard you've been confused lately. Is it true you sold your house without remembering?" The most painful call came from Frank's brother Walt, who had flown in from Arizona specifically to check on me after Doug's allegations. "He says you've been making concerning financial decisions," Walt explained as we sat in my living room, "that you've become paranoid, accusing family members of stealing from you. Frank would want me to make sure you're okay." I showed Walt my medical records, my financial statements, and the detailed documentation of Doug's pattern of behavior. By the end of our conversation, his concern had shifted from me to my son. "This isn't the boy Frank and I taught to fish at the lake," Walt said sadly. "Something's gone very wrong here." "I know," I replied, fighting tears. and I don't know how to fix it without continuing to enable behaviors that are destroying him." That evening, after Walt left promising his support, Patricia came over with dinner. As we ate, she posed the question I'd been avoiding. "Have you considered that you might be partially responsible for Doug's behavior?" The words stung, but I knew they came from a place of love. "Every day," I admitted. "I've been reading about enabling and codependency. So much of it describes my relationship with Doug." "And Frank's," Patricia added gently. I nodded. Frank always wanted to protect Doug from consequences. When Doug was expelled from college for cheating, Frank pulled strings to get him reinstated. When his first business failed, Frank paid off the investors privately. Every time Doug faced a natural consequence of his actions, we, mostly Frank, but I never objected, stepped in to shield him. While Judy had to figure things out on her own, Patricia observed. It was true. Our daughter had received love and emotional support but had been expected to solve her own problems from an early age. The contrast in how they'd turned out was stark. Judy was financially stable, emotionally mature, and maintained healthy relationships. Doug seemed perpetually in crisis, always needing rescue. "The hardest part to accept," I said slowly, "is that our help actually hurt him. Every time we bailed him out, we reinforced the idea that he didn't need to change his behavior, that someone would always fix things for him." "So, what now?" Patricia asked. "You can't change the past, but you can change how you respond going forward." The next day, I met with Stephen Harmon again, bringing my financial advisor, Jane Prescott, along. Together, we developed a comprehensive plan that balanced protection of my assets with appropriate assistance for Doug's family, particularly Lily, who was innocent in all this. "First priority is securing your financial and legal standing," Stephen advised. "We'll draft powers of attorney for both healthcare and finances, naming Patricia and Judy as your representatives. We'll file the cease and desist orders against any claims of mental incompetence." Jane outlined a financial strategy that included setting up a modest trust for Lily's education, accessible only when she turned 18, and establishing clear parameters for what assistance I could provide Doug without compromising my own security. "The key is conditional support," Jane explained. "Any help must be tied to specific actions on Doug's part: financial counseling, job search efforts, budget adherence. No blank checks, literally or figuratively." I also consulted a family therapist, Dr. Eleanor Banks, who specialized in adult parent-child conflicts. Her insights were particularly valuable. "Your son has learned that emotional manipulation works," she explained. "The threats, the guilt-tripping, using Lily as leverage, these are tactics that have gotten results in the past. The only way to change the dynamic is to show these methods no longer work, while simultaneously offering a healthier path forward." Dr. Banks suggested a family meeting with clear ground rules and an agenda distributed in advance. "Be prepared for resistance, anger, even temporary escalation of manipulative behaviors," she warned. When entrenched patterns are challenged, the initial response is often to double down on what's familiar, even if it's dysfunctional. By the end of the week, I had assembled a support team and developed a plan. I no longer felt adrift in a sea of confusion and hurt. I had direction, boundaries, and perhaps most importantly, the conviction that addressing these issues directly was the most loving thing I could do, both for myself and for Doug. The night before I planned to reach out to Doug, I found myself looking at old photo albums. Images of my son as a laughing toddler, a proud little league player, a gangly teenager with his father's smile. Somewhere inside, the angry man who had threatened me was still that boy, the child I had rocked through fevers, taught to tie his shoes, cheered at graduation. I touched a photo of Doug at 8, missing his front teeth, beaming with pride over a science fair ribbon. "I still love you," I whispered to the image. "But I can't keep loving you in ways that harm us both." The next morning, I sent a text to both Doug and Amanda. "I'd like to meet to discuss a path forward that works for everyone, including Lily. My lawyer's office, Tuesday at 2. Let me know if you can make it." Doug's response came hours later, terse and non-committal. "We'll think about it." I spent the weekend preparing, practicing what I would say with Patricia and Dr. Banks. I needed to be calm, clear, and compassionate without wavering on my boundaries. The stakes felt impossibly high, not just my relationship with my son, but Lily's well-being and Doug's long-term recovery from his financial dysfunction. Whatever happens, Dr. Banks reminded me during our final preparation session, remember that you're offering real help, not the quick fix he wants. True love sometimes means saying no to what someone demands so you can provide what they actually need. On Monday, my phone rang. It was Amanda, calling without Doug. "We'll be there tomorrow," she said, her voice subdued. "Doug doesn't want to come, but I convinced him. Things are getting worse. I think we need to listen to what you're proposing." Her words gave me the first flicker of hope I'd felt in weeks. Perhaps there was still a path back from this brink after all. That night, I slept soundly for the first time since the confrontation. Whatever tomorrow brought, I was prepared to face it with clarity, strength, and the deep, abiding love of a mother who wants better for her child than what he believes he wants for himself. Stephen Harmon's office projected understated professionalism, with leather chairs arranged around a polished conference table and discreet awards lining the walnut bookshelves. I arrived 30 minutes early, reviewing my notes and documentation while trying to calm my nerves. Patricia came for moral support, and Judy had flown in from Colorado the night before, determined to be present for what she called the intervention Doug has needed for 20 years. Stephen greeted us warmly, showing us to the conference room where Dr. Banks was already waiting. We had agreed she would attend as a neutral facilitator, someone who could redirect the conversation if emotions threatened to derail our purpose. At precisely 2 o'clock, the receptionist announced Doug and Amanda's arrival. They entered the room together, Doug's expression stormy, Amanda looking nervous. I noticed immediately that Lily wasn't with them a good decision, though I wondered who was watching her. "Thank you for coming," I said, rising to greet them. Doug ignored my outstretched hand. "Let's get this over with." Stephen invited everyone to sit and outlined the ground rules. Each person would have uninterrupted time to speak. Questions would be held until presentations were complete, and Dr. Banks would intervene if the discussion became unproductive. "I've asked you here because I love you, and I'm concerned about our family's future," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "The events of the past month have revealed problems that go beyond a disagreement about my house. They point to patterns that are hurting all of us, especially Lily." I presented the evidence I had gathered methodically, the history of financial bailouts, the pattern of living beyond means, the manipulation of family members, the contradictions between claimed poverty and observed spending. I didn't accuse or judge, simply laid out facts with documentation. "Your father and I contributed to these patterns," I acknowledged. "We thought we were helping, but our well-intentioned rescues actually prevented you from developing financial resilience. I take responsibility for my part in that." Doug shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent as I continued. "I've put together a proposal that I believe offers real support while encouraging long-term change." I distributed folders containing printed copies to everyone present. "I've set up an education trust for Lily that will cover her college expenses when she turns 18. That's non-negotiable and not dependent on anything else. Amanda's eyes widened slightly at this, and I saw her squeeze Doug's arm. Additionally, I'm offering financial assistance for 3 months' rent in a modest apartment, contingent on your participation in financial counseling and adherence to a structured job search plan. Jane Prescott, my financial advisor, has offered to work with you at no cost to develop a sustainable budget and debt reduction strategy. I continued outlining the offer, which included health insurance coverage for Lily, assistance with resume preparation and interview coaching for Doug, and family therapy sessions to rebuild our relationships. What I cannot and will not do, I concluded firmly, is provide unlimited funds without accountability, or allow threats against my legal and financial autonomy to continue. The cease and desist orders will remain in place, and any further attempts to question my competency or interfere with my affairs will result in additional legal action. When I finished, Dr. Banks asked if anyone had clarifying questions before we proceeded. The room remained silent. She then invited Judy to speak. My daughter's presentation was brief but powerful, detailing how differently she and Doug had been treated growing up and the results of those disparities. "I love my brother," she said, looking directly at Doug. "But watching him manipulate our mother, after everything she's been through with Dad's death, is something I can't stay silent about anymore." Doug's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Dr. Banks smoothly transitioned to Amanda, asking if she wanted to share her perspective. Amanda hesitated, glancing at Doug before speaking. "Things have been difficult," she admitted. "Doug's job loss hit us hard financially, but also emotionally. His identity was so tied to his position and income." She twisted her wedding ring nervously. I think we've been in denial about how serious our situation is. It was easier to believe we just needed a temporary rescue than to face the reality that our lifestyle isn't sustainable." Doug shot her a betrayed look. "So, you're siding with them now?" "I'm not siding with anyone," Amanda replied with unexpected firmness. "I'm trying to be honest about where we are. Lily deserves parents who can provide stability. If that means accepting help with conditions attached, maybe that's what we need to do." The revelation that Amanda recognized the problem sent a wave of hope through me. If she was willing to acknowledge reality, perhaps she could influence Doug. When it was Doug's turn to speak, he initially refused, arms crossed defensively. Dr. Banks waited patiently until finally he burst out, "This is an ambush, plain and simple. You've all decided I'm the villain, the irresponsible one who needs fixing. None of you have any idea what it's like to lose everything you've worked for, to face starting over at my age." "You're right," I said gently. "I don't know exactly what you're going through. That's why I'm offering resources, not just money. Because I believe in your ability to rebuild, but I recognize you need support to do it." "Support with strings attached," he scoffed. "Accountability isn't strings," Judy interjected. "It's scaffolding." Stephen then presented the legal aspects of my proposal, including the consequences if Doug continued making false claims about my mental state. "These are serious matters," he emphasized. "Marion is offering a path forward that avoids those consequences while providing genuine assistance." As the presentation concluded, I noticed Amanda whispering urgently to Doug, who seemed to be struggling with competing emotions. "Doctor." Banks suggested a short break, and Amanda immediately pulled Doug into a private conversation in the corner of the room. When we reconvened, Doug's posture had changed slightly. Still defensive, but less combative. "I need time to consider this," he said stiffly, "and to discuss it privately with my wife." "Of course," I agreed, "but I do need your answer by Friday. The apartment assistance offer has a time limit, as I've located a suitable place that won't remain available long." "And if we refuse?" Doug challenged. "What then?" "Then you make your way forward without my financial assistance," I replied steadily. "My relationship with Lily is non-negotiable. Any attempt to restrict my access to her will be addressed legally if necessary. But the financial support is contingent on accepting the entire package, including counseling and budget oversight." The meeting concluded without a firm resolution, which Dr. Banks assured me afterward was not unusual for initial interventions of this nature. "You've planted important seeds," she said. "Now they need time to process." As we left Stephen's office, Amanda lingered behind, telling Doug she needed to use the restroom. She caught up with me at the elevator. "Marion," she said quietly, "I want you to know I understand what you're trying to do. Doug's pride is hurt right now, but I think deep down, he knows this pattern can't continue." She glanced back toward the conference room. "I'm going to work on him. This is the wake-up call we've needed." I squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of gratitude for her insight. "Thank you, Amanda. I'm not doing this to punish anyone. I truly want what's best for all of you, especially Lily." "I know," she said, and I believed she meant it. The next 2 days passed without word from Doug. I continued settling into my condo, hanging pictures and arranging furniture with Patricia and Judy's help. Having my daughter visit was an unexpected blessing amid the stress we stayed up late talking, rebuilding a closeness that had been shadowed by the constant crises with Doug over the years. "No matter what Doug decides," Judy said as we shared tea on my new balcony, "you've done the right thing, Mom. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's the most loving thing you could do." On Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was Doug. "We've made our decision," he said, his voice tense but controlled. "We'll accept your offer. All of it. The counseling, the budget oversight, everything. But I want to be clear I'm doing this for Lily and Amanda, not because I think I need fixing." Relief washed over me. "I understand. And Doug, this isn't about fixing you. It's about giving you tools to fix the situation. There's a difference." There was a long pause before he responded. "Maybe. We'll see." Another pause. "The apartment you found, is it decent? Lily will need her own room. It has 2 bedrooms, is within walking distance of her school, and allows pets if you decide to get one. I think you'll find it suitable." "Fine. When do we sign whatever papers you've drawn up?" We arranged to meet at Stephen's office the following day. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, feeling the first real hope that healing might be possible for our family. The next morning, Doug, Amanda, and I signed the agreement Stephen had prepared, formalizing the financial assistance, counseling requirements, and repayment terms. Doug remained stiff throughout, but I caught moments when the anger in his eyes gave way to something more vulnerable. Fear, perhaps, or even relief at having a structured path forward. As we prepared to leave, I handed Amanda the keys to the apartment. "It's available immediately. The first month's rent and security deposit are paid." Doug looked at the keys, then at me. "I'll pay you back," he said, the first voluntary commitment he'd made. "All of it. You'll see." "I believe you," I replied, meaning it. Amanda hugged me goodbye. Doug didn't, but he met my eyes directly for the first time since our confrontation. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. 6 months passed with remarkable swiftness. Summer faded into a crisp New England fall, and my new condo began truly feeling like home. I joined a book club in my community, started water aerobics classes 3 times a week, and volunteered at the local library, reading to children activities I'd always wanted to pursue, but never found time for, while maintaining the big house. The transition with Doug and his family progressed in fits and starts. The first 2 months were the hardest, with Doug initially resistant to the financial counseling sessions and resentful of the budget oversight. There were tense phone calls, missed appointments, and moments when I questioned whether my approach would work. But Amanda proved to be the unexpected catalyst for change. "She's taking the lead in their financial recovery," Jane Prescott reported during one of our check-in meetings. "She's cut up credit cards, taken on part-time work at Lily's school, and created a detailed tracking system for their expenses." Doug's following her lead, somewhat grudgingly at first, but with increasing engagement. Doug found a job after 3 months, not at his previous executive level, but at a smaller firm with growth potential. The salary was lower than he was accustomed to, but combined with Amanda's income and their drastically reduced expenses, they began slowly climbing out of debt. Our personal relationship remained strained, but gradually thawed. Doug's initial coldness gave way to cautious politeness, then occasional moments of genuine connection. I was careful not to push, focusing instead on rebuilding my relationship with Lily through regular outings and Sunday dinners. One particularly significant evening occurred 4 months after our agreement. I had invited them for dinner at my condo, and Doug arrived carrying a check. "First repayment installment," he said, handing it to me with a hint of pride. "Ahead of schedule." "I'm impressed," I told him sincerely. "Jane says you're making remarkable progress." He shrugged, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. It's not easy, starting over financially at 40, but there's something, I don't know, clean about it. Knowing exactly where we stand, what we can afford, what we actually need versus want. It was the most reflective comment he'd made about their situation, and I took it as the gift it was, careful not to overreact and scare him back into defensiveness. The most dramatic change came 5 months into our arrangement, when Doug called me on a Tuesday evening. "Mom, I need to tell you something important," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Amanda and I have been in couples therapy, along with the financial counseling. This was news to me. The couples therapy hadn't been part of our agreement. It was her idea," he continued. "She said if we were rebuilding our financial foundation, we should work on our relationship too." He paused. "Yesterday, our therapist suggested I need to make amends to people I've manipulated or taken advantage of." My heart quickened. "I see. I've been making a list. It's longer than I expected." Another pause. "You're at the top. Would it be okay if I came by tomorrow to talk? Just me, not Amanda and Lily." When Doug arrived the next evening, he seemed nervous, fiddling with his car keys as he sat across from me at my kitchen table. I served coffee and waited, giving him space to find his words. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what happened with the house," he finally began. "The things I said to you, the threats I made, the lies about your mental state." He met my eyes directly. "I was wrong. Not just tactically wrong, but fundamentally wrong. You had every right to sell your house and secure your future. I had no right to expect you to sacrifice that for us." The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. It goes deeper, though," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "When Dad died, something in me just broke. He was always my safety net, even when I pretended I didn't need one. Without him, I felt exposed, like everyone would finally see that I wasn't as successful as I claimed to be." "Doug," I said gently, "your father loved you completely, but he wouldn't have wanted you to live in financial chaos. He would have wanted you to stand on your own feet. I know that now. My therapist helped me see that I've been chasing Dad's approval my whole life, trying to maintain this image of success even when it was destroying us financially." He took a deep breath. "I blamed you for selling the house because it was easier than admitting I'd failed, that I wasn't the provider I thought I should be. We talked for hours that night, delving into patterns that had shaped our family for decades. Doug spoke about the pressure he'd felt growing up as the son who would carry on Frank's legacy, while Judy had been free to chart her own course. I shared how Frank and I had enabled his financial dependency out of misguided love, never requiring the accountability that might have helped him develop healthier habits earlier. When he finally rose to leave, Doug did something he hadn't done since before Frank died. He hugged me, a real embrace, rather than the perfunctory one he'd offered at holidays. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, "for everything." "I know," I said, holding him tightly. "I'm sorry, too." The weeks that followed brought a cautious renaissance in our relationship. Doug began stopping by occasionally just to check on me or help with small projects around the condo. Amanda invited me for coffee regularly, and our conversations grew increasingly open about their financial recovery journey. Lily spent occasional weekends with me, her presence filling my new home with the laughter and energy I had feared might be permanently lost. As the 6-month mark of our agreement approached, Jane Prescott presented a comprehensive review of Doug and Amanda's progress. They had adhered to their budget, reduced their credit card debt by 30%, established an emergency fund, and created a sustainable plan for continued financial recovery. Most importantly, they had begun having honest conversations with Lily about money, breaking the cycle of financial secrecy that had contributed to their problems. On a crisp October day, I received an unexpected invitation. The Grants, the young couple who had purchased my house, were hosting a small housewarming party and wanted me to attend. "We've completed the nursery," Jessica wrote, "and would love to show you how we've made the house our home while honoring its history." I mentioned the invitation during Sunday dinner with Doug, Amanda, and Lily, uncertain how Doug might react. "You should definitely go," he said, surprising me. "I'd actually like to meet them properly, apologize for any stress I caused during the sale. If you think they'd be okay with me coming too?" The party was scheduled for the following weekend. I confirmed with the Grants that Doug's presence would be welcome, explaining the positive changes of recent months. Jessica was gracious, saying they'd be delighted to meet my family under better circumstances. Walking up to my old house that Saturday felt surreal. Flower boxes now adorned the windows, and the front door had been painted a cheerful blue. Doug and Amanda arrived just after me, Doug visibly tense but determined. Jessica welcomed us warmly, her pregnancy now clearly visible. Her husband Michael gave us a tour, pointing out the changes they'd made while asking thoughtful questions about the house's history. When we reached the kitchen, I noticed they had preserved the height markings on the doorframe, adding a small plaque that read, "The Sullivan Family Growth Chart." "We wanted to keep it," Jessica explained, seeing my emotion. "It's part of what makes this house special." Later, as other guests mingled, Doug approached the Grants privately. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw Michael extend his hand afterward, and Jessica's genuine smile as Doug spoke. Whatever amends he had made appeared to be accepted with grace. On the drive back to my condo, Doug was unusually quiet until he finally said, "They're good people, the right people for that house." He glanced at me. "You made the right decision, Mom. For all of us, really." Those words, so simple yet so profound coming from him, felt like the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. The next day, Doug called with news that brought our journey full circle. "We found an apartment we want to buy," he announced. "It's a condo, actually, smaller than we're used to, but in a good school district for Lily. With our improved credit and the money we've saved, we qualify for a mortgage we can actually afford." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely delighted. "Here's the thing," he continued. "The down payment we've saved is almost enough, but we're about $4,000 short. I'm not asking you to give it to us," he added quickly. "I'm asking if you'd consider a loan with proper paperwork, reasonable interest, and a payment schedule I will absolutely honor." The old Doug would have expected me to simply provide the money as a gift. The new Doug was proposing a legitimate business arrangement. "I'd be happy to consider it," I told him. "Have your proposal ready when you come for dinner on Sunday." When I hung up, I sat on my balcony overlooking the community garden, where I now tended a small plot of herbs and flowers. The journey of the past 6 months had been painful, confronting, and at times seemed impossible to navigate. Yet here we were, emerging on the other side, with relationships not just repaired, but fundamentally transformed. Frank would have been proud, not of my giving in to Doug's demands as the old patterns would have dictated, but of finding the strength to love our son through accountability rather than enablement, of recognizing that sometimes the hardest path is also the most necessary one. The house that had been the center of our family's life for 40 years now belonged to a new family, creating their own memories within its walls. But the true foundations of family love, respect, honesty, support had proven portable, relocating with us to new spaces and evolving relationships. As autumn leaves drifted past my window, I felt a profound sense of peace. The crisis that had begun with a shocking dinner announcement had ultimately delivered all of us to healthier places. Doug and Amanda were building a sustainable life based on reality rather than appearances. Lily was growing up with more financial honesty than her parents had experienced. And I had found my voice, learning that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but perhaps the most loving action I could take. Love, I realized, requires both compassion and boundaries, the wisdom to know when to hold close and when to step back, when to rescue and when to allow natural consequences to become teachers. In losing my house, I had ultimately helped my son find his way home to himself. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt in the short term but proved healing in the long run? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about family, growth, and the courage to set loving boundaries. And if you know someone who might benefit from this message, please share it with them. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you strength and wisdom in your own family relationships.